You know the saying, like a moth to a flame, right? It's this classic picture we all have of an insect that just can't resist a light, even when it's dangerous. But what if that's starting to change? What if in our super bright cities, some moths are actually evolving to ignore the very thing that's supposed to attract them? Okay, let's dive into this amazing evolutionary puzzle. So that's the big question here. We've known for ages that all this artificial light at night can be a real death trap for insects. It messes with everything from their mating habits to migration. But now, it really seems like some moths might be fighting back. Not with weapons or anything, but with something way cooler: evolution. To get to the bottom of this, we're going to focus on one particular species, the spindle ermine moth. See, researchers started noticing something fascinating, a real split in how they behave. The moths living in brightly lit cities were acting totally different from their cousins out in the dark countryside, and that was a major clue that something really significant was going on. And just look at how different their worlds are. I mean, on one hand, you've got urban areas just drenched in artificial light all night long. And on the other, you've got these rural spots that are almost perfectly dark. We're not talking about a small difference here. It's absolutely massive. And that huge gap seems to be a super powerful driver for natural selection. So the first real hint of this evolutionary shift popped up in 2016. A study took larvae from both the city and the country and then raised them all together in the exact same lab conditions before testing the adult moths. And this setup is so important because by raising them the same way, you can be pretty sure any differences you see aren't just about their environment, they're genetic, they're evolutionary. And the results? Whoa, they were stunning. The urban moths showed a 30% weaker flight-to-light response than the rural moths. A 30% drop. That is a huge behavioral shift. It strongly suggests that in the city, the moths that weren't so obsessed with light were the ones who got to survive and, pass on their genes. Okay, but that discovery just left us with an even bigger question. How were they doing it, right? Did they evolve less sensitive eyes, or was the change coming from somewhere else? Maybe their ability to fly in the first place. Well, that's exactly what a new study in 2024 set out to answer. And this is where the story gets really, really cool. The answer wasn't in their eyes, it was in their wings. By going back and analyzing the physical traits of the moths, researchers found a clear structural or morphological difference between the city moths and the country moths. Let's look at the hard data. The urban male moths, on average, have wings that are almost 4% smaller by area than the rural males. Now I know, almost 4% doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But in the world of flight mechanics, even a tiny change like that can have a huge impact. And it wasn't just the males. The pattern held for the females, too. Urban females were found to have wings that were about 2% narrower. So across both sexes, the trend is exactly the same. City moths are evolving slightly smaller, less robust wings. And here's the absolute kicker, the direct link. The researchers found a super clear statistical correlation. The smaller a moth's wings were, the less likely it was to fly towards the light trap. The physical change and the behavioral change, they're two sides of the same evolutionary coin. The scientists who figured this out say it all supports something called the reduced mobility hypothesis. Okay, so what in the world does that mean? Let's break it down. Essentially, the idea is that in a dangerous, broken-up city landscape, being a less active flyer is actually an advantage. If your habitat is chopped up and full of deadly light traps, the individuals with smaller wings, who are naturally less likely to fly long distances, are more likely to just stay put, avoid danger, and survive. It's like evolution is favoring the homebodies. So you see, this is way more than just a quirky little story about one type of moth. This is a window into evolution happening right now, driven by the worlds that we've built around us. This timeline really puts the speed of this into perspective. I mean, widespread electric street lighting is barely a century and a half old. That's just a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. Yet in that tiny window, we can trace the story from the first behavioral study in 2016 all the way to finding the physical reason in 2024. These moths have already adapted to survive in our bright new world. This makes the spindle ermine moth a perfect textbook example of what scientists call rapid anthropogenic evolution. That's just a fancy way of saying evolution driven directly by human activity. Our actions, in this case just lighting up the night, are unintentionally rewriting the genetic code of the species all around us.
So why does all this matter if you're not a moth expert? Well, understanding this process has some pretty major implications for how we study and protect wildlife in our cities. There are a few key takeaways. First, our main tool for counting moths, light traps, might be seriously biased now. If city moths are avoiding them, we could be underestimating their populations. Second, less mobile moths mean less gene flow between populations, which could make them more isolated and vulnerable. And finally, this gives us a real conservation strategy. Creating dark corridors like unlit parks or greenways could be absolutely essential for connecting habitats and helping wildlife thrive.
Ultimately, this makes us rethink what a city even is. It's not just a sterile, concrete jungle devoid of nature. Nope. It's an active, powerful, evolutionary laboratory where the pressures we create are forging new traits and new behaviors in the species that live right alongside us.
Which leaves us with a pretty compelling question to think about. If moths are changing their very wings to survive our city lights, what other incredible adaptations are happening all around us, in pigeons, in squirrels, in spiders, completely hidden in plain sight?